How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, great discussion we're going to have today. Today, we're going to be talking about management by walking or wandering around, MBWA. Some people say walking, some people say wandering. What we're going to do is we're going to cover the need. Why should management be walking or wandering around? What are the benefits? And guys, if you're in management, really make the attempt to get out there and talk to your troops. My guest today is going to be Joe Pomponio, and we're going to go in real quickly to discuss some of the benefits that arise from walking around and just being seen by your people. Now, guys, my show is sponsored you by two entities. We have American Military University. If you guys are looking to get a higher education, a degree, if you guys are looking to add to maybe another degree, get that master's, please check out American Military University. We're looking to bring more experience into the classroom. It's a great online school, very supportive of what we do in corrections, also very supportive of what we do on Tier Talk. And we also have Guardian RFID. From inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence, Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. And guys, we also have a YouTube channel. We'll be putting videos back up again there shortly. So if you guys get a chance, please check it out. And we also have Inmate Manipulation Decoded. That is on the market as we speak. The link is in the description. And I believe it's on Amazon. It's in Target, a couple of places. And my second book is in the hands of the publisher. So we have some time for that. That won't be out anytime soon, but we're on that next step. Still got to go through some of the rewrites. All right, so let me bring in our guest. What's up, Joe?
What's happening?
What's going on? How is it in Texas?
Man, it's hot.
Heat wave.
Very hot.
What's the temperature there, Joe?
It was 105 today.
It's like 80 here. Whew.
Man, I'll trade you in a heartbeat.
You don't want to live in Jersey. Jersey's got...
Hey, been there, done that, babe.
Oh, so the temperatures here are
Oh,
crazy.
yeah. Grew up in Philly.
Oh, okay. So you know.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Joe, you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Joe Pomponio. I'm a retired lieutenant from Texas Department of Corrections, 30 years.
That was a quick intro, Joe. That's all you got? Sorry about that. That was quick. It's hard.
I'm going to tell my life story right up front.
I don't know. Usually Russ has a lot more and Connie has a lot more. You're like, got 30 years done. I'm like, oh, hey, I just got the screen onto you. Okay, I get it. And a frequent return guest on Tier Talk now. You could add that.
Well, yeah, we could add that. Yes, definitely.
I think that has value. Hey, I just want to go over something real quick. So management by walking or wandering around. Real quick, Joe, are you familiar with this process? Even before you retired, were you a supervisor that found
your
way
walking around? Very familiar. It was something that's something that's I'm sure it's widely promoted throughout all states at this point. In our state, one of our founding creators there, his name is George Beto. Actually had a unit named after him, and he had quite a few acronyms there. And one of his big pet peeves, and this is a warden from the late 50s, early 60s into the 70s. And one of his big pet peeves was management by walking around, and that's kind of something that they promoted throughout the whole agency ever since.
Right. And real quick, guys, just a little history on management by wandering around or walking around. Now, guys, I want you guys to realize something. I'm reading a lot of business books, a lot of books on leadership. I'm actually going to have an author by the name of Alan Stein come on this Tuesday. We're going to go live. We're going to be discussing some leadership tips. I'm bringing stuff from the business world into corrections. Now, some of the stuff we're probably already utilizing that we don't know. And we probably don't even realize where it began from. So management by walking around, the origin of the term has been traced to executives at the company Hewlett-Packard for management practices in the 70s. However, the general concept of managers making spontaneous visits to employees in the workplace has been a common practice in some other companies as well. Also, management consultant Tom Peter and Robert H. Waterman had used the term in their 1982 book, In Search of Excellence, Lessons from America's Best Run Companies. And I'm familiar with this part right here. Historian Stephen B. Oates asserts that Abraham Lincoln invented the management style by informally inspecting the Union Army troops in the early part of the American Civil War. And I did a lot of reading on the American Civil War, and he was out there all the time trying to, check out his troops because, again, he had he wasn't so happy with the successes that the North weren't having at the beginning of the war. So he found himself walking around a lot to try to get the morale of the troops. So again, management by walking and wandering around is really our ability to connect and see things firsthand, which brings us to our first part of the discussion. There's going to be two parts of this discussion. This is going to be the first part. And this first part's broken up into a couple areas. But we have management gets to know staff. Staff can get to know management, visualize the process, and identify any concerns, and check on the morale. So let's start with getting to know staff, basically being that model. So again, Joe, walking around as a lieutenant, as a sergeant. Well, sergeants definitely going to see them a lot more in the front line. But as a lieutenant, how important is it for you to walk around and be engaged with your front line?
It's very important. It's a must. It's the only way you're going to know the culture of your unit, the culture of your shift. At the same time, you get to see everything that's going on, what your officers are doing, things that you see that they don't see, that maybe you can help them out and either promote a little bit safer environment for them or give them tips and tricks on how to do, certain tasks. But being visible is, it's not only a plus to your staff, it kind of gives them the sense of security that, the lieutenant's got their back. And at the same time, as you're walking around all these areas and hitting the pods and wings and stuff like that, the inmates know you're walking around too. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, and I want to mention, guys, something when it comes to this getting to know staff and staff getting to know you. Guys, when you as management make the effort to start walking around and really get engaged with your staff, which is really about the engagement, you got to make sure that you're not rushed. Like, you got to make sure that you don't have conflicts in schedule. This is not something that you try to squeeze in between two must appointments. You want to be able to kind of be able to move around without the pressures of having to be somewhere else, because it's very hard for management to really be engaged in the employee when they feel that they have to be somewhere else in a few minutes. I hate when you're trying to talk to somebody and they're constantly looking at the clock because they're more focused on where they're going to be next as opposed to where they are in the moment. There's very few people that are able to, even under the pressures of time, to really be engaged in the moment. So I would recommend that you find time to free your schedule. And by the way, guys, I know that most of us are overwhelmed with work, especially at the management stage. We can be very overwhelmed with work, but people are your priority. Don't get so overwhelmed with work that people no longer become your priority. Just like you have to get that work done, part of that work is engaging with your people, and they should take the highest priority. So again, you may have all stuff that you think has to come across the table, but if you're not out there talking to your people, to be honest with you, this stuff has to wait, because half of the stuff that's coming across your table wouldn't be accomplished if it wasn't for what's going on down below, and you need to really be invested and engaged in that. So definitely, and I also like how it sets up the structure where, so when I was an officer, believe it or not, I didn't really have a lot of interactions with my administration. One, I was on second shift, so I really didn't see them a lot. And then when I was a supervisor, I went to third shift, so I was working the overnight shift. So they were so distant to me. And the funny thing is that anytime if I had to see them, I was always dreading it, because to me, it's like, I'm only going to see them if it's negative. I mean, what are they calling me for? And it was this weird feeling of conflict when they called me. That's why I feel that the engagements are important between you and your front line, between management and the front line, because you don't want them to dread every time they have to see you. You want to have like this dialogue. You want to be able to get to know them. So we do have these unstructured dialogues. So if you do happen to call them to the office, they're not automatically dreading it. I know it's maybe a quick metaphor, but it's like when you're in school being called to the principal's office. Like the only time you see the principal is when you're in trouble. So the moment the principal calls you, your stomach is turning, you don't know what you did wrong. I think in this working environment, when, you know, you have management, let's say they need you to come down to the office, you don't want them to come down with this attitude that they're in trouble for something. That's why it's good to balance these interactions with something positive and let them know that you're approachable. You know, let them know that, hey, if you need something, I'm here for you. So definitely getting to know each other is very important. But again, also for the front line and for management, more so for the front line. Remember, guys, when management does a tour, they're going to have to see a lot of areas and meet with a lot of different people. So we want to make sure that the dialogue we're having with them, outside of getting to know each other, because that's always fine. I'm not pushing that aside, but make sure the dialogue is always constructive. You know, that we're doing something to move forward, because I get that we can vent, and sometimes that's good for us to go down and listen to that. But having said that, there are only certain things that even management has the power to change. So sometimes we'll vent for about a half an hour over concerns that management really can't do much about. They're just the translators. And now the problem is that we're having this dialogue, but we're really not moving forward anywhere, because in the end, there's not much I can do. I'm going to be the empathetic listener, yes, but you know, we could have probably spent more time on discussing other topics, or I could have went to another area and speaking to a whole mess of staff. And again, it's always going to be an effort to move things forward. Now, don't get me wrong, we could always have dialogues later on that are more scheduled like that, but I just want to make sure that the dialogues you're having on the floor have value and are in an effort to move things forward, and not just someone that just becomes more of an obstacle. Because again, guys, corrections is kind of taking this direction forward, and we're all part of it. You know, we're all kind of caught up in this. So, I mean, if you want to vent to management how bad the laws are and all this other stuff, and right now when I'm coming down there, I'm trying to get things to move forward. I get it. I'll listen to you for a few minutes, but in the end, I'm not really looking for obstacles. I'm looking for resources. So I'm looking to see who can help me carry this mission forward, because it has to happen. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The ultimate goal is to keep things moving forward. You know, 9 times out of 10, when you hit an area, you know, that the line staff always want to start with the negative, and that's fine. You know, let them get it off their chest. 9 times out of 10, they just want to vent, and they generally feel better after they vent. You know, listen to the negativity, but you know, end it with positivity. You know, keep them pushing forward. You know, just let them know that you hear them, and you know, you'll try to fix what you can. You know, but the ultimate goal is to keep it moving forward. You know, when you're walking around, that, you know, you want to, like you said, you want to create that trust. You want, you know, the main goal is to create trust, that bond, get that, you know, form that link between you and that line staff. You know, that's why investing in them is it's gold. It really is. You know, if you don't, they are your biggest asset. You know, and I used to teach it in the academy to the supervisors. You know, I tell you, you know, just remember one thing, guys. They can do the job without you being there, but you can't do the job without them being there. Invest in your staff, create that bond, keep them pushing forward. You know, getting all in. Don't be in such a rush that when you show up to an area, you know, to engage in staff, you actually seem more disengaged than you are engaged, because you're thinking about your next step, or shit, I gotta go run chow in 10 minutes, or crap, I got, you know, minor court I got to run with, you know, 35 convicts. You know, don't be in such a rush, you know, because your employees are your most valued asset. You know, and take the time to invest in them. You know, if they need to get something off their chest, let them get it off their chest. You know, 9 times out of 10, they feel better just by saying it, and you know, it's pretty much done.
Yeah.
Just keep them moving forward.
Right. And by the way, but that's the key. It's like I give them the chance to vet 100%, but also make an effort to move forward, because this is where it matters. Like, I think when management's walking around, this is their chance to communicate the why behind the things that are being done. I mean, most of the time when management's up top, all frontline gets is the what, and hopefully they don't get the how. Hopefully you empower the how. We'll get to that later, but they definitely get the what coming down at them. So when you're going down, that's your chance to communicate the vision. You know, this is why we got things going where it is. Now, sometimes the vision has to happen. So we want to have those dialogues to be as constructive as possible. So when we're walking down, we actually see or make efforts to move things forward. That's the key. We'll communicate the vision. Hopefully, you guys get an understanding of it, and then we go ahead and try to move things forward in that direction. I mean, again, it's a great chance to kind of, okay, this is what we have to do. We'll pass it down. Then later on, I'll come out during the week to see where the how is happening. Like how, and we're going to get that comes with the empowerment part of it all. Another good thing about this all, guys, and part of what we were touching on too, is to visualize and identify. Now, guys, as management, especially on the executive side, a lot of the stuff you read, you may not necessarily see it in action, including policies or what happened the night before. You're reading it. You never really get to see the fundamentals of it all. And by the way, even as management, you got to find a way to never be bored with the basics. That means that you're going to have to go back to the floor and see how things are run on a very basic level, so you can understand the things that you're implementing that's meant to elevate that. Because remember, if you don't have the basic level, you can't elevate nothing. So you really do have to have an understanding of the basic level of operations when you go to implement the what. Now, that's why for me, and we'll get to it, but that's why you empower the how, because the people that understand the job at the most basic of levels are going to be your front line. That's why when you delegate the what, you really should allow them to, maneuver the how, because they're the experts when it comes to the basics. They're the experts that do it every day. And guys, when I say basics, that's the fundamentals of running a facility. So let me just tell you, I may say basics, but there's no simplicity in the word basics. It's just the fundamentals of what we do. So as management, you really have to be invested in those basics. And how do you get invested in that is really by walking around and identifying, the concerns, really, just hands-on. When you read something, you may read one or two sentences, but that whole issue down for the front line could have took an hour, could have took an hour and a half. So what you want to do is you really want to go beyond that paper you're getting, and once in a while, just sit down there and watch the basic running of a facility up close and personal, see the movement, see frontline maneuvering, and really just get understanding. So if there are concerns, then when you move it up the chain, so now you become that translator, you are literally translating those concerns at, again, a very basic level. It's a very basic but understandable level, as opposed to someone telling you it. It's like, yeah, you know what? I get it, but I need to visualize it. Let's go down. Let's check it out. This way I'm able to explain it, because I find this too, guys, in management. I'm sure Joe will agree. If someone tells me a concern or they write it out in an email and I'm reading it, and then I have to explain it to my higher ups, it's very confusing to me when they start asking me questions that I'm sitting there like, wow, all I'm doing is reading it. I really have no idea what the actual concern is. Now, when I actually go down and someone shows me it, and then I see the process of where they're trying to make the solutions happen, and all of a sudden where the hiccup is, now I'm seeing it firsthand. Then I can go back and kind of, as they're asking me questions, my higher ups relive the experience. So I'm pretty much through that experience, I'm able to kind of talk through the questions that they're going to ask. But I love it when you're dealing with a concern and you can see the interactions from the people at the front line trying to solve the issues, and then you come up to go translate the matters to the above in an effort to help, and you're so much more informed because of that frontline visualized experience. What's your thoughts on all that, Joe? That was a lot there.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, because and of course, a lot of that goes towards empowering your staff too. When you go down to an area and you see something, not totally just a blatant violation or anything like that, something that you see that you can point out, part of that is teaching your staff. The other aspect of that too is, when you're going down there, I used to tell the officers when I go down there, you guys are an extension of me. When you guys are running your areas, you're doing it under my authority. And I've never, even when an idea was brought to me that was just like, horribly bad, and something that couldn't be instituted within a policy bounds, always not so much empower, but give your staff that leeway when they see a problem. Let them offer you a solution, because you're providing them valuable training, and the thought decisions, the decision processes that they may need later on down the line when they decide they want to start going up for rank or leadership positions. Use all the tools that you have necessary to to keep your staff going forward and not backwards.
Yeah, guys, remember when we touched on the not doing it within the time constraints? I'm reading this thing right now while Joe's speaking as well, and it talks about authenticity. It says, a personable walking around style is simply not possible when it's forced or hurried. Remember, the goal is to foster relationships, and that's something that just can't be done if it's obvious that you're rushing to your next appointment. Your team members will pick up on any lack of sincerity, and that will make your team building efforts much more difficult. They also say, inclusiveness, rather than just spending time with those who report directly to you, get out and visit the frontline workers as well. Make sure that this becomes a regular process. Lack of consistency is likely to be seen as lack of commitment on your part. Management by walking around allows you to be perceived as actively interested in team members as people. Joe mentioned that before we started the show. And the last part's the engagement part. Through engagement, you can gain valuable information as you encourage impromptu discussions with individual workers or small groups. Use your walking around time to ask important questions and observe your frontline team members in action. Provide good news and information as well by sharing success stories and your personal vision. Personal vision, as we talked about, is key. And don't forget to offer your sincere thanks and appreciation for the meaningful contributions they make. And guys, in corrections, we don't really look for recognition, but we definitely look for appreciation. So walking around saying that I appreciate what you're doing matters. And again, going back to the vision, it is very key, because if you don't have a vision, it's like activity with no direction, plain and simple. If you may have a group that's active, but if they don't have no direction, they don't understand the meaning of their actions. They don't see task significance. I always like using that word, but it's true. So having said that, having that vision could also help provide a purpose, which will, and again, it will go towards what we're going to talk about in a little bit, but could also help empower your staff. The last part of this thing about walking management by walking and wandering around is checking on morale. What's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Well, when you're walking around, your main goal is to have your subordinates or your employees view you as an object of support, not dread. You want them to know you're there to support them, and it goes back to, what you said, when every time you call them out, it's for a negative, then they're always going to have that negative mindset. The ultimate goal is to keep morale flowing, let them know that they're doing a good job. And, always engage with your staff to the point that, when you appear in an area, the first words that they either mumble under the breath or come to their brain is, "Oh shit, here's Lieutenant. What now?" You want to be that vision and that visual of support and not dread. That's your ultimate goal. You want your people to see you as an object of a pushing force from behind that's pushing them forward and not pulling them back.
And you know what? It talks about morale here, and this little thing, they added something here that I thought was interesting. It does say morale will likely get a lift from management by walking around or wandering around too. Casual exchanges and opportunities to be heard really do help people to feel more motivated, more inspired, and more connected. But I like this part. Furthermore, you'll boost accountability and productivity, as any actions that you agree upon with your people will likely get done because you see one another regularly. And that's kind of what you were touching on a little bit. I mean, it's great because I truly do believe that people really don't work for the agency. They work for their people, if that makes sense. I mean, and the reason why I agree with that is because most times when someone leaves a company, it's usually not the company. They're leaving someone shitty, someone that sets a bad atmosphere or a bad culture. Culture at the highest level. So I do agree with that. I do agree that we do want to do the best for the people that we admire, that we look up to, that we could even strive to be, depending on where we're at in our journeys in our career, but ultimately people that we have good, trusting relationships with. So if me and Joe are communicating all the time, and you know what, I'll be nice. I'll make Joe my supervisor. So let's say I'm the front line and Joe comes doing his rounds, and me and Joe start building a rapport, and I start looking forward to seeing Joe professionally, whatever it is. I know he's got my back. He's a good supervisor. I like going to work with him because he empowers me, and I'm going to want to do for him. I'm going to want to work for him. You know, if he's got stuff he wants me to get done, I'm going to want to get it done. And it really has nothing. I mean, yeah, in corrections, I get it. We want to make an environment that's safe for everyone. But be honest with you guys, we need people to motivate us to work. And that good trusting relationship with your supervisors does motivate you, because the reason why, I'm going to tell you another reason out of this too. The more I get to know Joe, the more I get to trust Joe, the more I'm willing to stretch out of my comfort zone. So I'm not afraid of assignments anymore, because I know if I fail at something, Joe's got my back. You know, so you want people in corrections to not be afraid to stretch out of their comfort zone. So you don't want an asshole supervisor who's going to look to micromanage you or come down on you the moment you make a concern. So if I build a trusting relationship with Joe, then maybe I don't mind going out of my comfort zone. I mean, I've worked with people who will only do what's prescribed to them, and they won't go outside of it. But when you work for someone, you really respect them, you'll start seeing those people just slowly going outside that comfort zone, because they're not doing it for the agency anymore. They're doing it for the people they work for, or in some sense, the people that are around them. But I think a good supervisor, and Joe, I mean, you know, comment on this, please, that could encourage a little bit of innovation too, because if you think about this, Joe, the people at the front line are the ones that are the closest to the magic happening. They're the ones that implement what has to be done. They're the how behind the what's being delegated. So if you have, you know, the people at the front line wanting to work for you and wanting to step out of their comfort zone because I trust Joe, I know Joe's got my back if I fail, you could wind up having a good force that is willing to innovate. And next thing you know, the facilities practices are evolving in something a lot better, because you have an empowered workforce, because you have Joe as a supervisor who, you know, has a bit of trust with him and his employees. What's your thoughts? Because that too is a lot to unwrap.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. You know, good supervision sets the tone for everything. And, you know, the administration above you, you know, and I'm just using my old position as an example, as a lieutenant, you know, your captains, majors, assistant wards, and wards above you know what kind of tone you're setting through the shift, because they can see. I mean, they don't have to directly see the officers, but they know by looking at their daily reports. They know, okay, well, Lieutenant Gangi hasn't had a call in all week. Lieutenant Ganji's been able to sign up, 6 to 8 people per day for overtime with no problems, versus, other lieutenants who average, wow, 3 to 4 call-ins a week. The way you set your tone, everybody above you will see this, and everybody below you will know this if you set the right tone.
Joe, you got to go in deeper with that, Joe. That was spot on, because I said something in general and you applied it so specifically to, we're going through facilities right now that are short staffed. So I mean, that's another element that you just added. Can you explore that? Because I know there's a lot of people that are going to relate to that. So can you explore that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll take, for example, my last assignment at a max facility just before I retired, a year before I retired, the average tenure of the officers that were on my shift, the veteran had maybe a year to a year and a quarter in the system. When you take on a whole new shift with new employees and new officers with not a lot of tenure, you're going to expect mistakes. And when you go to these shift briefings and you're talking to these officers, before you turn out or guard mount, whatever they call it, you got to let them know, straight out of the gate, look, guys, you guys are going to screw up. You guys are going to make mistakes. If they're small mistakes, know that I will have your back. We will do what we need to do to fix it, but I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to dust you off, and you're going to do it again and again and again until you get it right on your own. My job is to support you. You're going to fail. There's no doubt. It's not a matter if, it's a matter of when. You're going to fail. But you as a supervisor, how you handle that failure is key, totally key. And like I said, once you build your staff up the numbers speak for themselves. With the number of call-ins that you have, that you average a week, my facility was short staffed that, we would literally be on the radio maybe 45 minutes to an hour to the end of shift, because by that time your relieving lieutenant and sergeants are already coming in. They've already taken whatever call-ins they're going to take, so they know how many people they need to work overtime. And when you key up that radio and say, hey, night shift needs 5 people to stay over. If you can help me out, call it out. And when you get, 11, 12 calls, hey, Lou, I got you. I got you, Lou. Wherever, I got you, Lou. I'll take care of it. I got you. That's when you know that you've connected with your staff have connected with you, and you have set the tone, and you're steadily moving forward. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah, it's a great way to apply, that good value relationship between the supervisor and the front line. And speaking of that, with employee morale and the word value, I think when you're walking around and you're able to communicate that vision, the best way for that vision to be understood, the best way for that vision to be understood on a very immediate frontline level is, one, always, as Joe said, the importance of teamwork, how we have to work together, because you want to do that to accomplish the vision. But you also want to have the foundation of value underneath that. I think that when there's a direction ahead and people are able to see where we're headed, then they can find out where their piece plays a part in that. We did a scenario about a puzzle. If you don't know the picture, then you don't know how your piece works in, where the value of that piece is. Well, I think when it comes to communicating the vision and being effective with that, is really about communicating the value that people have towards that greater destination. So if I'm walking around and I see people doing their job effectively, I think it's great for me to tell them I appreciate them for these reasons. These are the reasons why I appreciate you, because if you haven't done this, then we couldn't get this done. And I don't care how basic people may think their job is, because I'm going to be honest with you. If we fail at the basics, we lose control of the facility. The sad thing is the basics are never really recognized. They're only scrutinized when they're not done. They're never really recognized on the back end of a successful day. It's funny, too, because if we have a day in corrections that is, and I'm going to say it, if we had a day that's quiet, so hold on.
The Q word.
I just said the Q word. I'm right now, prisoners around the country are falling apart. But when we have let's say an uneventful day, and I hate using the word uneventful, people don't realize that a day where nothing happened is on the back end of a successful day at the basics. To some extent, maybe obviously a little extra stuff being done, but for the most part, it's a successful day at the mastering of the basics. Never get bored at the basics, right? So when people say uneventful day, I don't believe it's uneventful. I believe a lot of things occurred to make it quiet. I think uneventful minimizes the importance of the basics. So I think it's great when a manager can go down and maybe recognize an officer for doing a routine tour, or doing a routine search. I used to hate supervisors that were like, well, why are we going to give this person something because all they did was find something in a routine search? Because we want to motivate them to keep doing those routine things. Guys, to be honest with you, not a lot of people are going to find themselves in extraordinary situations to be brought up to management and to be recognized or even appreciated. Sad to say, but it's true. That's why management, by walking around in regards to the morale, can go down and recognize those who may not have been, next to something extraordinary. So that's when we go down and we recognize the routine, the basics, because without the basics, the facility, it crumbles. So I think that's a great way to motivate good morale, because when you go to talk to the people, you're thanking them for the work that they do every day, that in their mind, they go unnoticed. And I think it's our job to go down there and say, I see you. I see you. And the good thing about that too, guys, as I mentioned, is you don't want to only, see the basics when they fail. You don't, I think that's, we say, oh, it's just the basics, but when the basics fail, we're quick to write everybody up. I think it's great to let them know, hey, I know it's the basics, but great job, because if you didn't do this today, A, B, and C would have occurred. And Joe, real quick, as a lieutenant, did you find yourself touring and just kind of showing appreciation for the routine work that's being done?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you always want to praise the positives. You know, uh, most of our units in Texas have what they call the employee of the month for security and non-security staff. For those that aren't in the security position, because a lot of those departments too, like your mailroom, classification, whatever, these people are forgotten heroes as well. The ones that are reading 3,000 letters a day, scanning, looking for contraband, that might be touching something with fentanyl, or your classification chiefs that are running committees after committees after committees after income and chain. No matter what the position is, that's why we have the employee of the month for both security and non-security. That gives us a chance. We already have a process in place where you can write something down and have them sign it, but seeing something on a piece of paper saying that you're doing a good job other than your annual evaluation, I think it's key to call them outside of those boundaries and give them something a little more special, to give them that extra motivation to want to do better, to want to try harder, to want to go further. Just as an example, we would have our monthly, what they call the wardens meetings, where, they call all the departments heads in and the supervisors. Well, by that time, we've already voted for an employee of the month from each shift. And we would require these employees, these COs, to come to the wardens meeting with us. And again, when you tell them that they're being requested to come to a wardens meeting, it's, oh shit, what did I do?
Right.
But, when you got them in there and the warden says, okay, well, before we get started, I want to recognize a few people. And Lieutenant Pomponio submitted something on Officer Gangi for going above and beyond his call of duty, for, getting all this done, in his area, still managed to get all his tasks done in that shift, even though he had 3 fights on that pod. But he still managed to regain order. He still managed to get, chow fed. He managed to get necessities handed out, mail handed out. He managed to do all his ins and outs on top of everything. And he did it with pride and professionalism. To give them that kind of motivation, it's priceless. It may sound corny, but I'm telling you, everybody strives to hear those words every once in a while in their career.
You're right, Joe. I think that's why it's very important for management, when they are walking around, to kind of acknowledge those routine things. And before we go into that next little second part of the discussion, there is one other thing I want to mention here. It kind of touches on what Joe said before. When you're walking around, so when you have high level management that's walking around, you could be the connecting piece to the bigger picture. So I also think that when you're walking around, as I said, reminding people of their task significance, sometimes that's also reminding people of their need to work together as a team. So you become that person that fills in the gaps. Because you mentioned the different departments, and it made me think a little bit. We kind of touched on it, but just to make sure it gets out there again, a little bit of another perspective on that is that you are that person that can connect the gaps and, bridge any, any isolated agendas, if you will, because sometimes you have these departmental responsibilities that really come down in isolation when we should be trying to do what we can to support each other. So I think as a good manager, when you're walking around, you should always try to make the effort to show everybody the bigger picture. And what I mean by the bigger picture is the collective effort, not just recognizing you as what you did for your department, but also for what you did for another department. By you doing this helped them out. By you doing the rounds so efficiently, we're able to get the programs on this unit. Well, whatever the case may be, I mean, whatever you do, your effort should always be to heighten people's perspective so they can start seeing themselves in connection to the other departments. I think as management, you see further and wider than most of the people on the front line. So having said that, your job is to really, when you get down to that front line and talking to them, you really got to try to elevate their perspective so they can see how they connect to the other pieces. again, it's just a privilege to, as management, to have that perspective. But again, you need to communicate that perspective to the front line so they know that their work isn't just for themselves. It isn't just for their department, but it's for something that's bigger and greater. And again, guys, that's the mission before the vision. That's the mission before the vision. The
Absolutely.
mission. Yeah. Okay. So just to move to the second part of the dialogue, this is something that I don't think is mostly done when people are walking around, because I don't see this in any of the articles I read before we did this show. So when I'm walking around and I'm looking to identify concerns, to see how things are running, visualize, yes, but I'm also trying to see where I can be of the most value in case certain people need help. Most of the time when I go down, it's really to help other people to carry out something that has to be done. My goal really is to, yes, I got to delegate the what, but I want to push down the how. I want to empower the how, but I also want to be on the back end explaining the why, because I think the why motivates people. I think the why gives people an understanding, and then it motivates them to really be invested in the how things are done. Now, when I walk around, when I get a chance to, that's another thing. And again, guys, as much as we do these shows, as much as we know what needs to be done, we're still growing in ourselves. When I look up to do a show, I know that I could be better at this. So I will wind up rewatching this show again and again to make sure I live up to my own expectations that I said in the show that me and Joe shared. Now, with that said, even though people are going to be giving me information as I'm walking around, hopefully in an effort to solve problems, because that's the key. You want information that helps move us forward. I still want to give them solutions that fall into their hands to implement. So when they're giving me problems, I also want to hear their solutions. I don't want people to give me a problem for every solution. I don't want that. I want people to, there's going to be trial and error, yes, but I want people to feel that they're empowered. So if someone says, hey, I can't do A, B, and C, I may ask them why not, and they'll tell me. It's like, okay, well, what do you think could be done differently? Now, mind you, I want to ask them because, as I said before, they're the closest to innovation. They're the closest. They're the ones that know the job the best. So when they come to me, I think they're the ones that are best able to have the solution. So my job is to empower them to try it out. So having said that, I think in a world right now, the way the world is going in corrections, we're looking for more information to be forwarded up, but we're not empowering down. I think as you're walking around, your objective should always be, what is it that I need to handle? I get it, but what is it that they can handle? Like that. So when I look at what I can handle, it's only because I have to handle it. That's because that's within my position. I have to do it. I get it. These are the jobs that I cannot delegate out. But having said that, when I'm walking around the front line and there's concerns, and let's say we identify them, these are concerns I really want them to be empowered to make the decisions on, and to go ahead and, act, feel like you have value through that empowerment. And again, it's really not meant for me to tell the front line how they can do their job better, because in my mind, they're the innovators. They're the ones that are doing it every day. I'm far removed. Don't get me involved in that, because to me, you guys are the experts on that. You guys should be able to make those decisions on the fly. You know why? Because since I've been walking around with you, we trust each other. I trust your decisions. Exactly. I literally trust your decisions. Joe, what's your thoughts on about, because when I was reading it, I didn't see a lot of that, like management by walking around. This is the Gangi aha moment. This is the Joe Pomponio aha moment. I don't see a lot of management walking around to, empower their staff. Because why, Joe? Joe, real quick, you know why? I want to add something on that, Joe, and then obviously, whatever you got to add, take your time with it. I just wanted to add one thing that can help out a little bit with the dialogue here. A lot of people see management by walking around as micromanaging, and that's not the case. That's not what it's supposed to be. As we mentioned, these are the things it's supposed to cover. Not once did we say it's supposed to cover micromanagement. So having said that, the one thing you don't want it to be is to be seen as micromanagement. So I don't want to be walking around. Someone goes, here, Gangi again. So the way to balance that is when I walk around to not be seen as a micromanager, I need to do the opposite. I need to empower. All right, sorry about that. I wanted to get that out.
No, absolutely. I agree 100%. Especially, I for the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years, I thought being a lieutenant was probably the heaviest and the worst position that there is. But if you're utilizing management by walking around and you see what these COs are going through day in and day out, you quickly know that your job is, you may be snowed under paperwork wise, but your job does not compare to what these COs are doing day in and day out to keep things between the rails, keep it between the ditches, keep things functioning without problems. Knowledge is power. Anymore, we're so quick to promote people just because we need somebody in that spot. Especially at the lieutenant scale, you should already know that job before you step into it, because that lieutenant should already been teaching you their job prior you to stepping up into it. Knowledge is key. In order for knowledge to work, you have to share it. My sergeants, they knew, don't come to me for permission. Tell me what you did. Tell me what you did to rectify the situation. I'll let you know if it was a good call or if you screwed up, and then I'll tell you why you screwed up, and then I'll expect you to fix it. But you have to give them that knowledge, not just the sergeants, but your COs. You got to give them that leeway, and the best way to give them that leeway and invoke that thought-provoking process is, number one, you got to know all your policies and procedures yourself before you can expect them to know it, because you're the one that's got to teach them how to not only understand the policies, but apply them and do so operationally and fundamentally.
Can I ask you another question about that too? So, Joe, for me, again, you got something that's so spot on. I want to touch on. So you said knowledge, which is key. I get it. And definitely having knowledge matters, but knowledge is really useless without experience connected to it. Like, you have all the knowledge in the world, but if you're not experiencing, then it's hard. It's really hard for you even to get the respect of the COs or the frontline people who's like, oh, here's this guy. He may think he knows it all, but has he ever really tried to do it? So is there a way in the process of you gaining that knowledge that you're also connecting that with experience, just to build a bit of trust with yourself in the front line in case you do have to implement something that could be challenged?
Absolutely. The easiest way, and believe it or not, it's a back to basics type situation. Play the what if game with your staff. We talked about playing the what if game with yourself, either as a recruit or just playing the what if game in general. Play the what if game with your staff. That's the easiest way to get them to soak up the knowledge that you have to share with them. We used to do it during turnout. I would pick somebody and say, okay, you're promoted to sergeant for the day. This is a situation. How are you going to handle it? What are you going to do? And then when they tell me what they're going to do, you involve everybody else in the process. You hear a bunch of yeses. You hear a bunch of no's. Okay, well, I hear some no's out there. Tell me why. And you always have that one employee that reads every piece of paper that they can get their hands on post order wise. And they'll be able to tell you, well, Lieutenant, you can't do it because it's against policy. You have to do it this way. Absolutely. Play that what if game with all your staff. And, another way is fair rotation. Don't always put the same people in the same places. You already know who your workhorses are. You already know who your dependables are. Trade that out, because, when you use them same people over and over in key positions, you start demeaning your morale. Everybody else thinks they're not good enough to be in those positions. Put them in those positions. Walk them around with you as you do your daily lieutenant stuff. And 9 times out of 10, the COs will look at you and go, shit, Lou, I didn't realize how much crap you got to do in a 12-hour shift. Not just inside the compound, but outside the compound. We got to walk those fence lines. We got to go up in those pickets. We got to make sure our weapons are operational. We got to make sure our officers are awake, make sure they're good, make sure, everything's functioning on the outside. Mobile patrol, our vehicles are in good shape, as well as inside the fence, checking for structural integrity. You know, and that's not even on top of the paperwork that you have to sign when you go from post to post to post to post to post. You know, the best way to handle it, I'm telling you, is knowledge. Knowledge, you will thirst them. They will never stop being thirsty for knowledge. You know, a lot of the officers have that tunnel vision. And for an example, when assaults happen, when staff assaults happen, you know, they automatically think that, you know, they're going to get felony charges put on them. Not the case. Not always the case. And they can't understand why the process doesn't move quicker than it does. That's why you have to explain that process to them. Look, folks, when an assault happens, we have to write it up. It goes through the disciplinary process. We and then turn it over to internal affairs. Internal affairs has to take it to the local DA in whatever county that prison unit might be in to see if they're even willing to accept charges on it. You know, make them understand why things aren't always cut and dry. And when you open their minds to that bigger picture, I'm telling you, you will have a shift that has the knowledge, that knows what decision to make before the lieutenant gets to make it. They already know ahead of time. Okay, I know we can't do this because of this. Therefore, I already know what the lieutenant's going to say. There's no reason for me to call the lieutenant. And then later on, when that officer goes on break, hey, Lou, you know, this took place, and I know we can't do it this way because of this policy. So this is what I did. Outstanding. Drive on, baby. Drive on. That's and that's the kind of interaction you want to have with your staff, because your staff is going to learn to trust you, and you're going to trust your staff. It's priceless. I'm telling you.
No, there's two things I want people to realize too. When you're working for someone, two things that you're going to look for that build a rapport with them outside of their reputation, if they have a good reputation, is going to be trusting in their experiences. So again, if you really put your heart and soul into the job, and now you're my supervisor, I'm going to trust in the work that you've done, you know, because at one point you've become productive, and, you know, I feel that, you know, you could move me in the right direction. Or because there are going to be some people that move up that may not have those experiences on the front line. And at that point there, you really, as a manager, has got to have that empathetic ear. But another way is, if you don't have the experience, another way for me to look at you as a supervisor is, do I believe that I have value in your eyes? Do I believe that you value me enough to do the best for me? And I can get a sense of that when we're walking around and we're connecting with each other. So you may not have ever done what I've done, but I know that you have value for my life, and I'm willing to listen to what you have to say, because I know at the other end of that is that you would not put me in a bad situation. So again, you know, you have the experience. That's great. That's an instant connection, you know, but I also think for those who are thinking like, well, Gangi, how do I connect with the front line? Because I was promoted up, but I don't have those experiences. And guys, I will say one thing, beyond the lieutenant, when you start getting pushed up into those executive positions, you're going to have to supervise departments that you've never had experiences in. So the best way to earn their trust is to literally show them right off the bat that you value them. Because again, if you don't show them that you value them, and you also don't have the experience, they're going to be like, I don't like this person. I can't trust them. They don't know what it's like to be me. So guys, I figured in my experiences, I've told people, I may not know what it's like to be you and to have to do this specific function. Again, now with administration, overseeing all these different areas of responsibility that I really have never have been on the ground with those. Then the ultimate thing is, but I can show you I care for you. And, you know, I hope that you can trust in my sincere meaning when I say that I care for you. Now, the cool thing is, though, is if you can get both. Not only do I have experience in, you know, the work that you're doing, but you also know that I care for you. And that, to me, puts the relationship on a whole other level. I mean, that's why you'll see officers that are so connected to their sergeants or so connected to their lieutenants, because not only do they see someone that models what it is that they would expect, but they also know that this person genuinely cares for them, because they also can relate to them from that basic level. What's your thoughts on that, Joe, on the experience and then the value?
Yeah, I mean, the experience is it's key, but it's not always a requirement because, like you said, different facilities run different ways, and if you're promoting from a quiet facility to a facility where you have fights every day, every shift, of course, you may have a sergeant who's been a sergeant for 5 years on a smaller facility that didn't have any major incidents or incidents of any kind of major issue. And then you promote them to lieutenant. You put them on a unit where they have incidents damn near every shift. Obviously, they're not going to have the experience. Main thing to remember is no matter where or how you promote, be transparent and know that you're not without fault. You're going to fall and you're going to make mistakes just like everybody else. That's where wisdom, that's where experience comes in, trial and error. You're either going to get it right or you're going to get it wrong. If you get it wrong, you're going to learn from it, and then next time you're going to get it right. 10 years down the road, you're going to be sharing that same kind of information with your sergeants below you. The main object is to network. For me, I made sure that the sergeants knew what I was required to do on a daily basis. And it was important, not just to me, because, as a lieutenant, you kind of lighten your load a little bit just so you're not trapped in an office doing reports or statistics that you have to report to the administration every day. So you can spend more time with your frontline staff while your sergeants are in the office doing the stuff that you're supposed to be doing. Not only you're giving them that valuable experience and making them more comfortable to step into a leadership role as a lieutenant, you're also giving that experience and that wisdom, that goes with it. And that's the same thing with the frontline staff. You got to give them that wisdom. And, a lot of our wisdom came by trial and error. In 30 years, trust me, I fell on my ass a few times, but I always had that support. I've always had wardens that, look, Lou, yeah, you screwed up. But you know what? 23 years, this is the first time you screwed up. Trust me, we got you. Don't do it again. Understand what you did wrong. Communicate that with your staff so it doesn't happen again. That's why being totally transparent with your people at the same time you're trying to connect with them is just ultimate key.
Well, Joe, I think the best way to even show people that you care, because, the experience can sometimes be seen. I mean, especially if, the person has a reputation that people are well aware of, or if you worked with the person throughout their whole career. The care, and in turn, shows that I value you. So when I say that I care for you, Joe, that means I have value for you. And that has to be expressed. Now, some people may not be so overt with that. Like, I'm not going to walk up to Joe during a shift and say, hey, Joe, just a reminder, I care for you, and keep it moving. And that's not how I express the care. I think how I express the care is usually with my investment in time in those individuals, connecting them. If they ask questions, sharing the why, not just the what or the how, literally sharing the why and building some connection that allows for vulnerability too.
Oh, without a doubt, because, not only, for job related issues, but stuff that's going on in their personal life. They may come in one day and you notice they're off. If you've connected with them, when they're on their game and when they're not on their game. And when you call them to the side and say, hey, man, you're kind of sidestepping today. Are you good? Everything okay? It may not be okay, but when that officer heads down the hallway, he's like, shit, Lou knew that I was having an off day. Mm-hmm. That's cool. And he actually asked about it. He asked, is my daughter feeling better? Is my mom doing better? Connected. Yeah. I mean, just having that value, not just job wise, but having that personal investment in your staff is it's a value. It's a value that has no value. I mean, it's just.
I know what you're saying. It's just it doesn't have a price to it,
no, it doesn't have a price.
And the great thing about that is that's only developed by walking around. You can't develop that through emails. You can't develop that through memos. You have to develop that. You have to develop that by the investment of time. And I'm using the word investment over spending. because investment is usually an effort to get something positive in return, which could be the relationship, mutual growth, whatever the case may be. Spending time is usually just no forward momentum, just spending time. I like the investment side of it all. If me and Joe are having a dialogue, I hope at the end we both have grown from it. We both are now moving forward with it. That's why, going back from what I said before with the venting, yes, I get we want to vent, but eventually what I would like to see are people on the front line being more resourceful as opposed to obstacles. And I would also like to see that for management as well, both ways. I would also like to see management proving to their front line that they're a resource and that we're not an obstacle. So come to me if you need something, Hey, Joe, anything you'd like to say in closing, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, in order to spread the vision, you must have vision yourself. If you personally or on the job don't have a vision for your team underneath you, you're really not a leader. You're just a robot issuing orders. Take the time to invest in your staff, empower their knowledge, know them personally, know them when they're on their game, when they're off their game. Be willing to support your staff through their faults. Key. Because if you support your staff through their faults, they'll feel more comfortable about making the mistakes and not having to walk on eggshells every day. Support them, empower them, give them that knowledge, and give them that latitude and that leeway to make their mistakes, and and help them learn from it. Your employees are your most valued asset, and the only way you're going to get to know them assets is by getting off your ass and actually getting out there and walking around and know your folks. Shift briefing 30, 45 minutes long. That's not long enough for you to know 30, 35 officers that you're turning out to positions. The only way you're going to know them is by investing in them, walking around, talking with them, and taking that time to personally invest in them and let them know that you're there for them.
Yeah, that's the most important piece, and that's a big part of management by walking and wandering around. John Maxwell has a quote, and he says, "A person who knows how may always have a job, but the person who knows why will always be his boss." And I think that's why it's our job to always communicate the why, because we want to have our people to be future leaders. And I really do think the right why can connect to a greater purpose. And a good thing about management by walking around is I'm reading this book now on, it's like leadership sort of, and it compares a lot to basketball. I'm not a big fan of basketball, but I do understand how the metaphors apply to, like, let's say leadership. The player would be the front line, the coach would be the managers, and the team would be the agency itself. And he's got a quote from Don Meyer that says, "A good player knows where they are on the court, but a great player knows where everyone is on the court." And I think that makes a lot of sense. That's where management by walking around comes into play, because you need to know who your people are. And I like what Joe said before. You also need to know, things about them, including what their purpose is. Communicate with them, even where their areas of giftedness are. Because if you have people and you're putting them in their areas of giftedness, they're going to be great to train others, because they're going to be motivated, because you're giving them something that they connect to. I mean, I know officers that love to do searches. And then when we go to, maybe pit a new person to train with somebody, you don't put them next to the person who loves to do searches. You put them next to whoever you can find. It's like, why? Put them next to this person who loves to do searches, because, in their enthusiasm to do searches, that may trickle down to the person who, says, "Hey, I love to do searches because you connected me with this guy and he just really gave me this vibe. And now I got that same motivation." But again, it takes time to really know what your people want to do, where their areas of giftedness are. And again, that's through walking around and connecting with them. As always, guys, I think it was a great topic. Again, management by walking around is needed, but I wanted people to know it's not just walking around. There's a lot more, a lot of stuff going on here that we talked about. So hopefully you guys take it in and understand, guys, the good thing about management by walking and wandering around is it's powerful for both sides. It's powerful for the front line to take advantage of these moments. Be prepared, but take advantage, and definitely instrumental in becoming a leader from the management side. If you don't walk around, you are not a leader. If you don't know your people, who are you leading? As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.